Hello, and welcome to the Power Within podcast. I'm your host, Laurie. Today, I'm doing a look back episode. I've had quite a few people say to me, "What is your podcast about? What's your niche? Like, if you had to summarize, what goes on in your podcast, could you do that?" And I thought about this, and the answer is I don't have a niche, and there's not a continuous theme that happens. And this is intentional, and it's okay with me. I know that, people say if you want to grow your podcast, have more of a niche, but I want to have genuine, authentic conversations with people. And I find that I have had people from such a versatility of backgrounds, and I think it gives to my podcast more because I'm able to have so many different conversations with so many different topics. And so I thought this would be a great opportunity to do a look back and share this for myself and for the audience of things that I love most about my podcast. I would like to put like a caveat on here. When I first started my podcast, I was only doing audio. So I want to be mindful and respectful that I did tell guests that I would not use recordings, and some of them were okay with it if I chose to do that, but I did not. So I do want to be respectful of that. And so this will only include snippets from video podcasts that I've done. So for the past few years, I've been doing that, but the initial first year I did not. So there won't be a lot from the beginning. I love and respect all of those guests, and I've learned so much from all of them, and I'm super grateful. So there's a lot of content that I wasn't able to share that also I think would have been beneficial. So I just wanted to say that, and I hope that you guys enjoy this. The first topic I want to dig in with you guys is about doing what you love and sharing with integrity. And I love this, and I think that this is so important. I think that it is integral, and it is an integral part of life to be able to share so authentically, but also from a place of integrity and being mindful of the things that you put out there, and also being true to who you are. So these are some of my favorite clips that pertain to that.
Some people are going to love the stuff you do. Some people are going to hate the stuff you do, but I think who cares? Like, you matter. Your story does. And be yourself and be authentic, and let the haters hate, because they're going to anyway. And you might as well just be you. And if you want to be visible, be visible. If you don't, that's okay too. Like, you don't have to. But I think everybody inspires somebody else. And it's important, I think, because I don't know, maybe your purpose in this world is to be yourself. And by doing so, you inspire others.
A long time ago, I learned the power of your word. So by keeping your promises with yourself, by honoring your word with yourself and others, it strengthens your word, and your word becomes like a superpower. So the more you honor yourself, the more you honor your word, the more you have integrity, the more power that has. So by not correcting that or saying, "Oh, I made a mistake, I apologize, this is what really goes on," then I basically poke a hole in the boat of my integrity or the power of my word. It's literally like a superpower. If you do what you say you're going to do, and the hardest thing to do to follow up with is just with yourself, when you have no one else holding you accountable, just doing what you say you're going to do because you said you're going to do it. It gives your word more power. And then, doing that with other people and your relationships and in your work as well, it gives it more power, so that when you say you're going to do something, it has the history and the momentum and the weight. And it's like a winning streak in a sense, where it's like you want to continue that power because you can create with that, and it's a very powerful thing. So in terms of sharing content online, I know that a lot of the content I've shared, I do my best to share as authentically and as honestly as I can. And if there's something that I pass a judgment on, or I feel that I have crafted a perspective that later is proven to be, that's not true, I have to go and correct it as best I can, because I devalue my word with myself and with others. And that is linked back to integrity. And I'm not just saying integrity because I want to, want to be all goody goody. It's just more like you're a Jedi. Like you're like a superhero that have these powers. And once you learn how to wield them, it's like magic can happen. So why wouldn't you want to have, that powerful, superpower to be able to create things? And I'm, we're speaking about sharing information, it's particular to what's going on in the world, but it applies across the board. So if you want to create a podcast, if you want to start a new business, if you want to do whatever, your word has power. And if you always say things to your friends like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this, and then you never do it, or yeah, I'm gonna go to the gym and I'm gonna get so strong and whatever, but you don't take that daily action of putting on your gym clothes and just going for a walk, you devalue your word. And then on the flip side of that, the more you honor your word and the more you actually do what you say you're gonna do, the more power it has. And then you can say, I'm gonna create a business. And there's no doubt in your mind, and it happens, and you find a way. So to me, that's exciting, and that's why I am passionate and committed to doing my very best in terms of integrity and what I do share, correcting any inaccuracies as best I can. And I'm still going to make mistakes, I know that, but correct them as soon as you can so that you can maintain for yourself and for others the power of your word. And I think a lot of people overlook that, so that's why it's important to me to do it.
Even though I'm not in that field, full time, I occasionally freelance. It's still important to make sure that that information is, one, accurate and unbiased. We live in a world where, people have lost trust in journalism. And I think, living in the United States and living in North America, we are very, very fortunate that we have, the freedoms of the press. Covering these stories, the various stories that you've just outlined, when you're in that moment, you're not really thinking about it, right? But you sit back and you reflect on it and you're like, wow, I really I was part of the word I'm looking for. Wow, I'm out of words. It's impactful. It's impactful that you're making sure that the public gets the right information, and it's a public service. And I take that to heart. It's one of the things that I impress upon, because as journalists, we are the first draft writers of history, and we have to be able to make sure we get it right. There's always this competition, like, well, we got to get there first, but making sure it's right and making sure that it's covered, whatever the topic it is, with dignity. That is the most important thing, because without that, you lose that trust.
One of my favorite topics to discuss is nature and animals. And I always get thrilled when it comes up when I'm talking to guests that I know also have passions for both of those things. I think that nature and animals have such a great capacity to teach us, how to live and how to be present and to stay in the moment and, not overthink things. And I love that it keeps you just grounded and present. And so I very much enjoyed when these guests had conversations about nature and about animals. So I hope you enjoy these. Okay.
I'm always learning about myself from animals, and I'm learning about the relationships around me from animals as well, and just seeing how they navigate through life. Because like I just said, animals are very in the moment. They're very present. And I think that humans could learn a lot from that just by being present and being there. They're not thinking about what's happening next month, their schedules, anything like that. They're thinking about exactly what their wants and needs are in that moment. And yes, it's important to plan. It's important to have schedules. All of these, I'm not saying don't do that. But I think overall, the thing that I've learned is to be happy with yourself and those around you in that moment, and not be thinking about, oh, I've got to do this, or that person did this to me yesterday, or like all of those things. Animals don't do that. They don't hold those grudges. They don't think about what's happening 10 days from now. They're just looking in that moment, and how you are reacting to them and how they're reacting to you in that moment is crucial, because that's how they survive. And I think humans were probably like that hundreds of thousands of years ago, but we've lost that over time, because everything now is about convenience and scheduling and all of these things. We're not thinking, okay, I'm watching what's going on around me because I might get eaten by a bear in 30 seconds, or I need to find food for tonight, or whatever it might be. We've lost a lot of that just because of our own circumstances, because everything is so accessible, and the communication has changed a lot. And I'm sure you've noticed this. I'm sure your viewers have noticed this, but the youth right now is so absorbed with technology that a lot of them have lost how to communicate in the present. So if you're, and I do notice this at events and different things, and I don't like to use that as an example, because a lot of times if fans come out to an event, they're already shy. It's not really a good representation of how they would be in another public setting. But if I'm just out and I see people interacting, even if I don't know them, that could just be at the movie theater and I see a bunch of teenagers sitting at a table, well, 9 out of 10 of them are on their phone and they're not engaging with each other. And so if you're not engaging in the present with those around you, whether they be humans or animals, you're not growing. You're not developing all of those skills that you need to carry you through life. And yes, there's things that you can learn through your phone. I look up things on Google all the time. I'm like, oh, I need to know this. But you're not learning essential human interaction, which I believe in the animal world and the human world comes number one. Because if you don't know how to read the people around you or communicate with the people around you in the present physical form, then how are you going to grow? How are you going to know where you need to be next? And how are you going to learn from those people if you can't even communicate with them? So I think that overall is what animals have taught me.
I look back from more of like the knowledge that I know now, I realized that there's so much evidence that supports like being in nature and grounding supports us being present. It supports us in being able to kind of unlock areas of our brain that we otherwise wouldn't be able to access. It supports us in having more clarity around our thought processes. And so I personally, whether it comes to being in nature from a sport perspective or just walking through nature, it has helped me understand the world. It has helped me kind of deepen my understanding of myself. And I think nature is such a huge part of kind of me and how I show up.
First of all, I feel like having a dog, and I'm sure having a baby, like a child, having children does the same thing, but my experiences with the dog is that they're constantly like living in the moment, and they're constantly teaching us about ourselves or about life in general. And so it seems kind of silly, but I'm constantly learning from Suze like about myself and about life. And this particular day I was walking Suze, and you know, I don't take my phone with me when I walk Suze because I really try to be present with her. Once in a while I'll bring her because I'll do a video for the subscription, but most of the time I just want to be with her. And I was walking her, and we always walk on this particular side of the street, but once in a while we'll go on the other side of the street. And on that side of the street, at one point or another, she saw a squirrel there. And now every time we walk on the other side of the street, she'll want to go onto the other side of the street because that one time we saw a squirrel. And it's amazing the memory they have. So as we're walking on this other side of the street, she's always looking on the other side, looking, and there's nothing. But she's constantly putting her attention on the other side of the street. And sometimes it happens that there's a squirrel right in front of us on the tree or crossing the sidewalk. And I just wait there and I kind of try to see, like, is she going to notice the squirrel? And she has very good scent, so she typically is pretty good at seeing it. But sometimes she totally misses the cue because she's too busy looking on the other side of the street. And so I kind of had an epiphany that, you know, there's so many times us as human beings, we're constantly waiting for that other thing or waiting for that looking on the other side of the street, and or we're looking at our phones, or we're doing whatever it is by not being in the present moment. And who knows what opportunity is passing us by at that exact moment. Who knows, like, you're walking down the street and you're on your phone, maybe like the man of your dreams will walk by you or something, you know. And it's like there's so many things that we're looking that we're not being here now, and we're looking at what might be better on the other side of the street. And you know, and true, there might be something amazing on the other side of the street, but what about the side that you're on right now? What about every step that you're taking, and just being grateful for those things rather than, you know, like the grass is always greener quote. And so that's kind of what Sue's has constantly taught me. And you know what? I mean, it goes so much deeper than that. Like sometimes I'll be like on my computer doing some work on my phone, and she'll just stare at me, and then all of a sudden she'll just go get her little pickle, which is like her little pickle toy, and it makes just the most annoying sound you've ever heard. It's like, wee, wee, and you're like, ah. But then she does that because she's like snapping me into this like very moment. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. It is break time. I don't really, this isn't an important thing. I'd like to spend a moment, like a conscious present moment with you, and then I'll like play with her a little bit. And obviously, I can't play with her all day long, but you know, there's just little moments like that where, you know, we kind of snap ourselves out of it, and I feel like animals and children are a really great example of bringing us adults back into the this very moment in time.
So when we're on the ranch, it was a bit hard to let those strings go with the kids because I'd always been in Australia. We have really bad venomous snakes. I think they're the top venomous snakes in the world. And I couldn't just let the kids run outside. Like, it is really bad. Even with the redback spiders, you'd leave their bicycles outside, and under the seats every day I'd be checking that there's no redback spiders that have recently crawled under there, because they bite, you got to go to hospital. So when we got to Canada, it was very strange to be able to just go, okay, kids, run outside. I know you guys have bears and you got moose and you got all that, but you can see those. I know that doesn't sound normal to, yeah, I don't know. My dad thinks I'm crazy. He's like, why would you prefer Canada over Australia with the wildlife? Because there's bears and stuff. But I don't know, snakes are sneaky and they are so fast, and you got to get to the hospital, and we live somewhat remote, and it's just always been a real fear of mine. So it was fantastic going to Canada and being able to just let the kids play in the backyard and not have to worry about that. And they had bare feet. There's no prickles. It's grass. Like, we don't have any grass out here. There was a scary time though with the kids that sort of made me think maybe I shouldn't let them go off. Oh, it was just my daughter. I didn't let at the time my daughter was 5 and my son was 2. So he stayed with me most of the time. But she went off to go feed the neighbour's goat with their little girl, and a farmhand cowboy guy was in his pickup truck. We call them utes here in Australia. And yeah, he came running over and he had the kids in the car, and he's like, just letting you know there was a bull calf moose looking at your kids, and I just picked them up, and I was like, oh my God, like the one time I let her go off and do something. But that was the only time that something bad happened in Canada where I was like, oh my gosh. Whereas here in Australia, the kids have to put on their boots no matter what when they go outside, and they have to go together, and they are not allowed to run to the chicken coop. They have to walk, and they have to look in the chicken coop first before they go in, because I'm scared that there's going to be a big snake in there. Or it's very stressful living in Australia.
I think that self-love and self-care and being conscious of yourself and the impacts that social media society has on you are crucial. And I think being able to listen to yourself and to understand, you know, where you feel that you should go and all those beautiful things are, and also understanding how outside things impact you as well is so important. So I love like how different people discuss this in relation to how they view and love themselves and how they change and how they grow to do the things that they want to do in life.
Say some kind words like, okay, maybe you don't like the way you look today, but you're a good person. You're going to have a good day. And the way you look doesn't make a difference to that. It makes a massive difference the way you speak to yourself. And also the subconscious takes it in and believes it. So a lot of us would say things to ourselves that we would never dream of saying to a friend or a loved one. We say things in the most fleeting of moments that we often don't even know we do it anymore. Even just silly things like, oh, how could you be so stupid? Words like that go straight into your subconscious and then you believe them. So the more that we tell ourselves that our bodies aren't good enough, the more we tell ourselves that we don't conform to society's standards, the more we believe it. So we've got to start with ourselves, because we can't change the way the world values us if we don't value ourselves first, for sure.
I wanted to be accepted by the popular crowd so much that I did things that I would not do now. I made fun of other girls. That competition, that behavior, that did become part of how I navigated the world, because I wanted to be accepted by other girls. And it was definitely amplified on a whole nother level as an adult. And I think it brought up the entire collective experience within myself. I'm more aware now of the ideas and beliefs that we have that are stemmed from lack of self-worth and competition, and kind of this, what I call, it's the princess archetype. We grow up in these societies where it's okay, as a woman, if you look a certain way, then you'll get a breadwinner. So put all of your value into looking a certain way, but not having the other abilities that come with being in tune with yourself as a woman, and your feelings being valid, your emotions being valid, and that being a heightened sense of self when you're connected through everything. And so I think that princess archetype is what's very competitive against other women, because it's well, I need to get a man, so I want to look better than you. And I need to look better, or I need to look what society says, because society is giving that standard to men to therefore be attracted to you. And so I think that that's where that idea comes from. And we grow up in a society where that is the norm. That's the standard. And I see the next generation having these conversations, that shifting moving forward, because what's happening on social media right now, even with filters and, people are getting plastic surgery because they're looking at filters of themselves with, different lips or contoured face, and they're very young. And I don't regret getting my breast implant surgery. It was part of my journey. However, I feel that if I didn't have the ideas and beliefs from the culture, I would have never done it, because I wouldn't value it. In other cultures, they don't have the same rate of plastic surgery. There's a reason for that. We get our ideas from the culture that we are part of.
I think by investing in yourself and taking a chance on yourself, it's like a mathematical equation. Once you do that, it automatically transforms the quality of your life, because on a subtle or a spiritual level, you're telling yourself, I'm going to take a chance on myself. I'm going to take a chance on the things I love. I'm going to take a chance on the things I believe in. I'm going to stand in the values that I have. And by taking those chances and investing in yourself, you birth life into it. And then therefore it changes your life in the sense, because you feel more connected to the sacredness of your own life and the preciousness of this experience that we have here on earth. So doing these different avenues of expression, producing, writing, entrepreneurship, all these different areas of my life that I'm now exploring and investing in, it's expanding the quality of my life and my appreciation for life. So I think the crux of it is, the more you invest in yourself and take a chance and believe in yourself and uphold the values that you hold dear and near to your heart, the directly correlated is the quality of your life improves.
The world in which we live in has an issue when it comes to goal setting. We tend to set goals around the 3 Ps, and the 3 Ps are possessions. So we want to own things. We want to own the nice car. We want to own the shoes. We want to have the iPhone. Possessions. power. We want to be in positions of power. We want to be able to have the high-paying job, you name it, and then prestige. We want to kind of look the part. We want to kind of have that prestigious kind of air about us. And when we actually stop and ask ourselves the question, what is it that have been kind of my biggest kind of life-changing events? What have been my favorite moments throughout my life? None of them are prestige, power, and possessions. Yet we kind of set all of our goals around these 3 P's. And instead, what we tend to kind of think about when we think about our favorite moments in our life, the things that have really kind of challenged us, are the 3 C's. Connections, so connecting with others, relationships, our partners, our friends, our family. Contributions, giving back to society, committing to community, giving our time and energy for kind of bigger causes. Connections, contributions, and challenges, and then challenging ourselves, whether it's in sports or whether it's in relationships, you name it. And I think that the challenge with social media for me is that it puts so much weight on possessions, power, and prestige, and very little weight on connection, contribution, and challenges. And so we get sucked into this digital world that isn't necessarily an accurate representation of the world around us. And it causes mental health issues. For me personally, I found that when you've got 300, 400, 500 plus friends on social media, everyone is doing something amazing at some point. So it makes it seem like everyone is doing lots of amazing things except for you. And in reality, there's just that one friend out of the 400 who's done something amazing. And so it gives you a very skewed representation of the world around us. And so for me personally, when I stopped using social media, I became way more comfortable in my own skin. I became way more comfortable just showing up in life how I wanted to show up, because I wasn't trying to compete or compare to other individuals. And so for me, I highly recommend anyone who's using social media to just be very, very conscious about how we're using social media. There's obviously pros and cons to everything. And when it comes to my writing, when it comes to the educational side of things, social media has been invaluable. But when I notice myself mindlessly browsing, I notice the detrimental effects that social media has on my own mental health, which is why I kind of ended up really cutting back and stopped using many of the social media platforms I was on.
I think probably when I quit my job 3 years ago, I got a lot more introspective about priorities, about what was important to me, about how I had just been on this path of doing what I thought I needed to do and not thinking too much about life or myself. And so when I quit my job, I was suddenly in some state of relief and panic at the same time of, okay, now what? And so that's when I really felt like I was getting repeated messages about go back to your writing, because then you'll be able to pull out those feelings, those ways that you want to change. And certain people really put me on the path of look at this, consider this. Is this something about yourself that you don't like, and how can you change it? Or is this something that you're really good at and you can expand on that? So it's been a process, and I just feel like it's not done. I think I still have more to learn and more ways to grow, and I'm just open to them now that maybe I wasn't before.
You know, especially for guys as well, it's like, feel, man. It's like, it's okay to feel, you know, and, you know, the consciousness, say, behind men, as I mean, you know, it happens for women as well, and maybe a little bit, but I mean, it's more men, I would say. They just hold on to their feelings, you know, and they bury it. Or even in like the workplace, and maybe, you know, for women that, you know, might be in like the corporate world as well. It's like you just bury your emotions in the corporate world. It's like you're not allowed to feel. So you're just you're just torturing yourself, basically. So the key with how we do it is that you observe your emotion. So you're kind of like the audience watching a film as best as you can. And it comes with practice and time. And some people get it straight away, some people don't. You know, if people have, say, that letting go sort of principle ingrained in them, or they've really nourished that skill set, again, through breathwork practices, through other, say, practices that can transition really beautifully, where, yeah, if you have an emotion come up, you're just observing, like, damn, I'm feeling like crap. Interesting. Okay. You know, and I wonder what pattern I'm releasing, or I wonder what frequency pattern I can let go of to harmonize with myself even more. And then you just let it be. It's letting your natural intelligence do the heavy lifting for you. So it's like getting out of the way of like, oh, what is it? What, oh, I'm feeling this. Okay, cool. Is that a limiting belief? Why am I feeling this? Why am I this? Why am I that? Why am I? And as we, if we dive into it, we try and figure it out, well, we're just burying ourselves in that timestamp, in that, say, I call it a coordinate. So, we're trying to move into a grander coordinate, but we overthink and we try and figure it out straight away. And as we're leaving, we just get pulled back. So the key is really just observing, and spatial referencing is a huge one. But yeah, it's about observing and allowing your natural intelligence to do the heavy lifting for you.
I love how the world is starting to embrace faith and having faith. And whether it's through religion or spiritual, however you choose to look at it, I think that it's so important to embrace that part of yourself. And I love having this conversation. And so many of my guests have shared so many beautiful moments of faith, whether that be through their religious beliefs with God or their spiritual beliefs with the universe and the divine, how that has impacted their life and how that has guided them to different paths and avenues that maybe wouldn't have been possible if they didn't trust that intuition that they had, or those feelings of a higher power guiding them to the things in life that are, that bring us the most joy and happiness. These are a few moments that I love that guests shared about their path and their spiritual journey.
I believe, first and foremost, I'm a God-fearing man. And I think you go through, or at least I know I have, you go through kind of ebbs and flows where you get close to the Lord and then you kind of fall off a little bit, or you get complacent and you don't do the work. But I'm somebody who wants to stay mentally, physically, and spiritually in line, right? Centered. The only way that you can be your best self in every aspect, I think, is to be physically, mentally, and spiritually centered, because this job can be demanding. Your hours are all over the place, so you're sleep deprived to a certain degree. You are working long days. You're talking 12 to 16-hour days. And then you get, 10 to 12 hours to get turned around. That includes your drive home. So you get home, 30 minutes it could be to drive home, 30 minutes back. So there's an hour already. So you got 11 hours at home to check in with your family, check in with the kids, eat some food, shower, try to get 8 hours of sleep, review your work for the next day, and then, get ready, go back to work. So it can be a bit daunting. And so the only way that you can really show up and be ready is to do those three things. And so for me, that's a big thing in my life. Pastor Miles always says, you start every day, put on your spiritual armor. And so that's what I try to do. Is the first thing I wake up, especially, not especially, but every day I wake up and I spend, a good 30 minutes with the word, getting ready, prayer and devotionals and different things. And for me, it puts me at ease. It puts me in a much calmer place. It helps me to prepare to take on different tribulations throughout the day, whatever they may be, or to see somebody else and to get their perspective. Because, a lot of times if you're not thinking from that vantage point, you may see someone who's having a bad day, right? And they're just being snappy, biting, whatever. And your natural inclination would be to cuss them out. But I find that when I spend more time this way, that it's to kind of just have sympathy for them in that moment, to assume that that's them at a lower point, and to not assume that that's just them. I like to believe that people on a whole are good, but the world is such a stressful place and there's so many distractions and so many obligations today. It makes people short. It makes people look quippy, little say things that maybe they shouldn't say, especially nowadays. I feel like people are they're getting so confident behind social media's force field that they're willing to say whatever they want right to people's faces. Where before social media, people, they might talk behind someone's back, but they weren't as confident to just start saying things to people. You'll hear stuff at the airport or wherever. Gosh, people, don't treat them so poorly. They're working hard. They're doing their best. They're just the messenger. Don't shoot the messenger. All that stuff. So I don't know. For me, it's just faith is everything for me. I wouldn't be here without God. I'm a God and family first person, and we put that first for our family, and that's how we function. And if I have to make the choice, I choose God and family every time. Every time. When it comes to work, when it comes to decision making, when it comes to our travels, we've said no to work due to it, just due to whether it's content or having to break the pack apart. We don't break the pack apart. We travel everywhere together. We keep our little traditional pack going, and hopefully we can keep doing that as the kids get older. I'm sure they're going to be like, I just want to go stay home with my sure that'll happen. But for now, we're mobile, and we that's how we function.
The story of the Chinese farmer being that people anticipate or sort of project what the meaning of something being is. Oh my God, I'm so sorry that your son got his leg broken by the horse that he was trying to tame. And in Chinese farmer says, maybe that's a bad thing, maybe it's not. And then the army comes to conscript him, and they reject the son because he's got a broken leg. And they say, oh, the neighbors all say to the Chinese farmer, oh, well, that's amazing that your son, wasn't conscripted to the army. He doesn't have to go and fight and die in these wars. And he says, maybe. So it's this idea that we don't know the full scope of the God's plan, of the divine plan, of all what this is meant to be. So that is the perspective that I bring into my life when I'm creating and when I'm trying to shape my reality and celebrate life. If things don't work the way I think they're supposed to work, or I want them to work, I step back into that relaxed state and remember God's plan is always going to be so much better than what I could have imagined. That doesn't mean that I don't have to have goals and have discipline and move forward and progress, challenge myself and get out there and be active and learn and grow and put myself in uncomfortable positions. It means that at the same time I'm doing that, I'm also in complete surrender to something far beyond what I could have imagined coming into my life. And that is difficult because you're engaging both at the same time. You're actively participating in life. You have goals and things you're moving towards. You have desires that you're creating. But at the same time, you are constantly tuning in and feeling to what I call God's plan or the divine plan in this moment. Am I being directed this way? Is this actually not the path that I'm supposed to take, but I needed to get to this point to learn XYZ lessons or to meet these people, and now I'm meant to go this way? It's a constant, for me, opportunity to pray, to listen, and to feel God's plan one step at a time. And that is easier said than done. But that is what I have found in my own life, and I'm still practicing that and working that as best I can, has been the most beneficial and productive and also sustainable way to live my life. And it's also the most adventurous. I'm sure that there are many people out there, and I get trapped in this sometimes, where I have goals and aspirations and I achieve them and I'm like, oh, well, that's it. Like I thought I would feel better about that. Like it's almost like I kind of get bored. Like I'm like, well, I did that. Now what? And so on the flip side of that, when I'm in tune and listening to, in this moment, what I'm feeling called to do or to not do, God's plan, as I call it, or the divine plan, it's always beyond what my mind could have come up with. And it's always exciting, and it's always adventurous, and it's always challenging. And that to me is a much more juicy way to live. It's very challenging, but I prefer it to trying to grip the steering wheel on my own and just force everything the way I want it to be. You have that option. You can do that. I like the surprises that God brings me, as opposed to
forcing myself into this world. And I've always said this is that way, forcing my way through life, I'll do 10 times the effort and get half of what I thought I was going to get. Whereas God's plan, I do half the effort that I thought I had to do and 10 times the reward. The real effort when it comes to following God's plan is the courage and the faith and the setting aside of the ego and of the facing of the demons and the insecurities and the fears and the doubts, which, you do that and it really is half the amount of work. The grunt work, the mental stuff, it's actually like far less. But the real work that you have to do is that internal stuff. And then all the other things, they just happen to work themselves out. And you go, whew, it's kind of amazing. Like, it feels like I can dodge bullets. It feels like I can sort of like, in the Matrix when he like jumps across the buildings and he does all this sort of supernatural stuff. To me, that I see that as being aligned with God, the divine, and God's plan. It's just like you feel you have wings. You feel like you can overcome things that otherwise you couldn't. And you couldn't because you're aligned. And that's where I feel it's a very exciting place to live in service to and constantly exploring, what God is presenting you with.
So my manager, I call my manager and I'm like, no, I don't want to do it. I want to pursue comedy. Like I want to, I want to pursue other things like that. I don't want to do another soap opera. And my manager is also a Christian, which is rare in my industry. And he said, well, to quote you to you, have you prayed about it? And I was like a teenage girl to him. I was like, what is there to pray about? Like this girl has a one night stand. She does cocaine off of people's backs. And like, what in the world is there to pray about? Like, I just played Queen Esther in like a Bible movie, like blah, 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 blah. And he was like, fine, well then I guess it'll be a quick prayer. And I was like, fine, I guess I'll call you back in like 30 seconds. So I remember I was driving on the 170 freeway in Los Angeles and it was merging to the 5 and I was sitting in traffic. And before I like even kind of start praying, I heard the Holy Spirit, not audible, but like in my spirit, which is how a lot of people hear God, but it's so outside of my thoughts. He said, this is your role. And I said, what? And again, I heard, this is your role. And I've been listening to this speaker called Graham Cook, and he always says, no Lord is an oxymoron. Because if Jesus is Lord of your life, that means you have to do what he says. So you don't actually get a say in the matter. But in John, in the Bible, like the book of John, it says that you're supposed to test the spirits and make sure it's the Holy Spirit talking to you, because sometimes just the devil can parade around like an angel of light and, tell you things that like are misguided. So I was like, all right, why is this my role? And like, it was one of the clearest times I've ever heard the Holy Spirit. And he said, I want you to play the role of Teresa because she is the exact condition that the world was in when I sent my son to die for them. And the audience needs to know, there are people in the audience that need to know that there is no pit so deep that people can find themselves in, that my love cannot find them still. And there is nothing that someone can do where my love cannot find them still. And when those moments, in soaps where they hold the camera on you, they're ridiculous, right? And they hold the camera on you at the end of the scene. He said, you'll play how that girl really feels. Because girls don't just have like one night stands to empower themselves. That's the lie that we're sold, but that's not the truth. You might feel good in the moment, like you're being loved or cherished or being paid attention to in the moment. But when the guy leaves, it's like you have a deeper wound than you started with. Or when the drugs wear off, now you have a deeper pit than where you started with. And so he was like, so I need you to play that role. And I was like, okay. And so I called my manager back and I was like, well.
It's not like I'm happy-go-lucky. It's just that I make time for myself, but I also want to make time for others. But also then I want to have time for the creative juices as God puts them to me to flow. So therefore, when you're creative, you can't really plan because sometimes it comes just like that. It just, especially for me, most of mine when I write is in the morning, right after a quiet time. And the majority of the time, stuff that I've shared on my Substack page has been that. Once in a while it might be at night. And even writing music but that has to come to me a certain way, and it has to come through God. And it's hard to what that feeling is, but it just comes.
And for me, it also shows me, like, look what God has created. Why wouldn't I want to be with him? Like, why would I want to be, like, I'm looking around this house, and don't get me wrong, it's nice. It's nice to have a house, but I'm like, drywall made by man, TV made by man, video game console made by man, toys. So I'm living with my buddy right now. He's a huge toy collector. Like, I literally look at Transformers, what is that, He-Man, G.I. Joes, Hot Wheels, they're everywhere. It's awesome. but I just see stuff, and I'm like, I'm always reminded that of the scripture that says, do not put your value in things of this world where moth and rust will devour it. It's like, well, I don't want to do that. I want to, and actually I don't even take pictures that much anymore, to be honest. Like, I used to be like the guy in the group that took pictures of everyone and everything all the time. But now I'm like, no, I think this moment should be just for me. Like, if I can't remember it, maybe I'm not supposed to.
Thank you all so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this look back on some great moments from the podcast. I would love to know, what has been some of your favorite moments from my podcast? What guests have you loved, and what content have you really connected with? What has resonated with you? I'd love to hear everyone's favorite moments. I know collectively people have shared throughout the years, but sometimes going back and listening or seeing something, people are like, oh, I really like that, or I missed that. So I hope that you guys have enjoyed this. Also, if you enjoy the podcast, if you could leave it a rating, that would be fantastic. I appreciate it. Give it a like on YouTube. I appreciate it so much. And the links are all in there. If anyone would like to follow the podcast account, I would appreciate it so much. I do some giveaways and different things for different guests, so there's links for all of that in my link tree that goes to the Instagram where I usually do all of those. And I hope that you guys are doing well, and I hope that the fall treats you great, and I hope that you take time for you and to enjoy all the beautiful things going on in your own life and to appreciate that. All right, thank you so much, and I'll see you again soon.